Okay, today I'm going to do something different than I usually do. I'm going to show you my different movies that I bought on YouTube, or some of them I bought on iTunes, but they sync to my Google account, so they still show up on my YouTube purchases. And I'm going to show you my YouTube purchases just because it's a quick, easy way to scroll through these movies and TV series that I've bought over time. I've bought, a few episodes of certain shows here and there. I've bought certain movies, most of them comedies, over time. And I've always wanted to do, really cool movie reviews and talk about what I liked or didn't like in various movies. Because I tell my mom and friends about funny movies I've seen. But this is going to be sort of a long one. I'm going to try to spend approximately 5 minutes or less on each of these movies. Will I get through them all? I really don't know. And let me make sure I'm recording. Yeah, it looks like I'm recording. Okay, so, yep. Okay, so starting at the top, these are in order of, which was the most recent. Fat Albert. They all give a little bit of a description here, but I'm going to summarize the plot of each of these movies in my own words and explain what I liked or didn't like about it. So Fat Albert is just a perfect movie. Seriously. I mean, the basic plot is a bunch of black kids from a cartoon show invented by Bill Cosby go through the TV screen of this in this girl's house because she cried and her teardrop landed in a remote. Yeah, it sounds insane because it is, but Fat Albert and all the other kids that go through the TV with him into the real world know nothing about the real world because they only know the world of the cartoon they're in. So a whole bunch of crazy stuff happens, and the whole thing is just a comedy. It's really, really funny. The only sad thing is that the main character is grieving because her grandfather died, apparently. And you don't really find that out till the end of the movie anyway, so I just spoiled it for you. But that's not the point of watching the movie. The point is just all the funny stuff that happens. Now, Easy A, I highly recommend this movie to anyone. This one is so funny because this girl gets a reputation as a slut or a whore or whatever you call it. There's rumors that she's having sex with everybody at school, but in reality, she's still a virgin. She's never had sex with anybody. It all started because she lied and told her friend that she had sex with somebody just to get her to shut up because she has this annoying friend. And then all these rumors spread, so then she just kind of enjoys all the funny things people are saying about her and just goes along with it and like, yeah, sure, I'm a whore, That it's funny because it just shows. I think the moral of this movie goes to show how quickly stories spread. Whether or not stories are true or false, one person says something to somebody else, they believe that person is true, and then everybody tells everybody, and lies can turn into massive amounts of people believing lies. Or the truth, possibly. But people really shouldn't gossip. That's basically the moral of this story, but it's very funny. So I highly recommend that because it's all around a good comedy, and I specifically, I think because of the fact that I'm a virgin and I don't have sex, I really appreciate these movies where there's somebody who particularly is not having sex, but in this case she's not having sex but everyone thinks she is, which is kind of the experience of asexuals. So now this next one, but I'm a cheerleader. Okay, this is great. So this cheerleader who is a lesbian, when her family suspects that she's gay, they send her to one of those Christian conversion therapy camps. And there's a lot of funny stuff. It's kind of a mix of some sad stuff, but it's mostly a comedy. There's just so much funny stuff that happens at this conversion therapy camp, and I think the ending is really good. So if you're into gay movies with gay people and all of the chaos that happens, that's a good one. Now this next one, I don't really recommend anyone watch this, The Miseducation of Cameron Post, because it's kind of a really, really sad movie. It's a lot like Boy Erased. If you've ever seen Boy Erased and that experience of a gay conversion therapy, type of movie, then you get the basic idea of what this movie is like too. But I watch these movies because it really gives me an insight into what is going on in these conversion therapy places that Christians send their gay children to, which is it's a horrible thing to do, but I've been trying for years to understand why people do this and why there's such an effort to turn gay people straight. I don't get it, and I probably never will. Now, this next one, okay, this is a really good comedy. So, this girl, okay, this follows the same theme as the previous two movies. So, this girl finds out that her boyfriend is gay. So she tries to have sex with him to cure him of his gayness, but then she ends up being pregnant from that. Meanwhile, he's sent to a gay conversion therapy place, and you don't see him for most of the movie. Meanwhile, she goes through high school trying to hide the fact that she's pregnant, which would never work in real life. But in the movie, it's funny. And the school she goes to is like a really highly religious school too. So everybody is all freaked out about who's sinning or what, and it's just madness. So most of it's just plain funny, you know. And most of the movies I watch are just comedies. They're just meant to be funny, although a few of them are just plain sad. And then Sharpay's Fabulous Adventure. Now, if you've ever seen High School Musical, you know who Sharpay is. And basically, she's like the biggest brat of all three High School Musical movies. But now she's got her own movie. What's interesting is she actually is a bit nicer of a person in this movie than she is in the High School Musical movies, and it doesn't have any of the other characters from those movies, with the exception of Sharpay and her parents being in it. But most of the other characters are not from High School Musical. Now, this one is one of those weird Christian movies, Do You Believe? And I saw this in recommended stuff on iTunes for who knows what reason. And I watched the trailer and I thought, well, okay, this is one of those Christian movies. So I decided I'm going to watch this movie and see if I can figure out what the message of it is, you know? And it's very difficult for me to figure out what the message of Christian movies is. And this one, it's like a bunch of just random stuff happens. A bunch of people almost die, and one guy does die of leukemia, but he comes back, all because people have this cross that they keep passing from one person to another. But there doesn't seem to be any real explanation of what's going on. You know, there's some talk about God and Jesus and the cross and all that, but none of it fits together. So it's one of those very badly made Christian movies, and I have failed to figure out what the message of this is. So I don't know. I can't say I recommend it, but maybe somebody else who has watched it can tell me what the point of that movie is. The Breakfast Club. Now, okay, this is one of the reasons I really wanted to do this movie review video, because The Breakfast Club, I ended up watching this precisely because this movie the ending of this movie was shown in the first Pitch Perfect movie, you know, and you know, they end up using that song, "You Don't You Forget About Me," you know, all that stuff. And that was The Breakfast Club was one of the most interesting movies. Basically, a bunch of kids from a school who don't really know each other very well, they all end up in detention on a Saturday. So they end up sitting there for hours and talking to each other. And by the end of the day, they know almost everything about each other's lives, and they end up all being the best of friends. Which is really cool, because I highly doubt that would happen in real life, but in the movie it worked out really great. The only trouble is that what I really don't like about that movie is that, you know, the one of the kids is a real jerk, and he's basically sexually harassing that one girl, the one who's wearing the pink shirt. You know, he's just a real jerk, and I think they made this R-rated, but they could have had this be like maybe rated PG if they would have just taken out most of what that guy did. He's the real jerk. Okay, and 16 Candles. Okay, this is made by the same people as who made The Breakfast Club, and this is the same actress as plays this one in this movie, obviously. But this is basically the more. How do I even describe this movie? Because I watched it, but the moral of this story is don't let teenage boys borrow your underwear, and don't drink alcohol. That is basically the moral of this story. And if you watch the movie, you will know precisely what I mean by that statement. But it makes absolutely no sense unless you watch the movie. But trust me, if you know, this movie is probably not for everyone. It's pretty scary. And of course, it has stuff that they really didn't need to include anyway. So it's probably rated R too. But it has a lot of funny moments in it. So now this one, okay, now The Book of Life is a movie that I actually recommend for everyone. I recommend this even for young children. This is a very cute animated type movie, and it's basically about a bunch of Mexicans and the Day of the Dead. And you know, when Mexicans die, there's the land of the remembered and the land of the forgotten. I don't know if this only applies to Mexicans or other people as well. Who really knows? But, you know, and the main character is this bullfighter who doesn't want to kill the bull. He's all like, killing the bull is wrong, you know, and so I love that part, because as a vegan who doesn't want to kill animals, I find that he's the character that I relate to the most. So that's cool. Now, there isn't really much that can be said about the Pitch Perfect movies. I mean, what's not to like about a bunch of people singing and dancing a whole bunch of perfect songs? I absolutely love all three Pitch Perfect movies. My favorite character has got to be Fat Amy. You know, she's just one of the funniest characters that says the most ridiculous things. And of course I like Becca too, but she's kind of like the main character that everyone likes. She's almost like the main character, I would have to say, although they're all great. But yeah, you have to see them in order too, because it doesn't make sense if you don't watch them in order. But they're great. The first one introduces everyone, but the third one is the best one. If you like Fat Amy, you gotta watch the third movie, because she's really kind of the star of that movie. And then I have the first season of the Hotel Transylvania series, and then I have all three Hotel Transylvania movies. And basically, it's like Count Dracula and a whole bunch of other monsters. You know, they are discriminated against by the humans, and they're afraid of humans. But throughout the three movies, the characters, the humans and the monsters, gradually learn to overcome their racism, basically. The whole series is really a statement on racism and prejudice and fear of those who are different. I think that's the moral of the story. So I think there's a lot of good lessons to come from watching this series. And plus, it's just plain funny. There's so much funny stuff. The only problem is it's very gross. It's not very vegan, I mean, because these monsters are like eating all kinds of weird animals and and eating a lot of insects too. That's gross. Even for people who are not vegan will get grossed out at the idea of eating spiders and worms, But of course, I'm ethically don't like that part, but it's still funny other than that. Now this movie, The Vow, well, it's funny because the way I ended up coming across it was because I was looking for things about vows, just like I wrote my book, The Vow of Chastity, I was looking about other vows that people do, and this one is called The Vow, and in this case I really can't tell you anything better than what it says right here. Against all odds, a young man must win back his wife's love after she loses her memory in a car accident. So really, it's like these people are married, but then the wife forgets all about the husband, and a whole bunch of crazy stuff happens. And when I watched the trailer, I thought, wow, this is such an interesting story that even though it's not the type of movie I typically watch, because it's really not all that funny, it's more of just a drama, and it's really kind of sad what happens, but it does have a pretty happy ending. So I really like, there's some good messages in it I like. But it's weird that I watched it because it's not the type of movie I usually watch. Now, this is one of the episodes of a series called Once Upon a Time. And basically, Once Upon a Time is a show where they take all the old fairy tales, Snow White, Cinderella, you name it, all these different fairy tales that have been told throughout time, and they make real people episodes based on it. That's basically how I could describe it. But they actually have a few episodes in which the characters from Frozen, Anna and Elsa, are in it. As you can see later on here, so in these further down here, you see Elsa and Anna from Frozen being in that series. And that's how I found out about it. But here we have V for Vendetta. Now, V for Vendetta is actually a very interesting movie. And the way I ended up coming across it, I don't remember exactly who it was I found out about this from, but there was a certain YouTuber who did a review of this movie, and he was explaining all the meanings behind V for Vendetta, what it represented, and I found it to be very relevant for the time we're living in, especially where we have the government lying to us about COVID-19 and all kinds of crazy stuff. It's very much like George Orwell's 1984 is kind of what this movie's like. Except that basically you have this guy that you never see his face. He always wears a mask. He just calls himself V, and he basically ends up killing all the people in government and blowing up Parliament. It happens, in England, so it's very British. So that's basically the whole movie in a nutshell. And there's some more of Once Upon a Time. Now, Rapunzel's Tangled Adventure. I watched all 6 seasons of Rapunzel's Tangled Adventure. And I gotta say that I really like, the movie Disney's Tangled, I like, but then they made a whole animated series based on those same characters. It's done in a 2-dimensional cartoon style instead of 3-dimensional like the movie originally was, but the characters have the same voice actors, they still pretty much look and talk the same, and it has new characters that were not in the movie, and there's 6 seasons of it, 6 seasons each of like 12 or 13 episodes, and the story is amazing. I just was so hooked. I have never been so addicted to a cartoon series since My Little Pony, which I've watched every episode of My Little Pony, believe it or not. I forgot how many seasons there were. Plus, the seasons are numbered differently on iTunes than they are in other places. Now, Dragon Ball Super Season 3. What's interesting is I have Season 3 on YouTube, but Seasons 1 and 2 I actually bought in the Windows Store. But I quit buying them in the Windows Store because the TV and Movies app keeps crashing on my computer. My computer's too old to really handle that app, so I can't really watch movies in that anymore. So I just bought, if I want to watch more Dragon Ball Super, I just watch it on YouTube is what I do. And I watched Dragon Ball Z a long time ago, years ago. I watched like all 200 episodes of the English dub of Dragon Ball Z, basically. Now, Call of the Wild, this is a weird movie. My mom got this DVD. Basically, this dog and this old man end up being best friends, but that's really the story about the dog who has many different experiences in his life. Several different people, take this dog different places, and so many crazy things happen. So, I mean, if you like dogs and you like old men and you like people exploring Alaska, then you will like this movie. Now, Ferngully. I have Ferngully 1 and 2. And I really love these movies because, the first one is about, protect the environment, don't burn down forests. We need the trees. And then, the second one is more about, these poachers, come and kidnap these animals and take them. They're probably going to sell them, which is something humans do, which is very evil. But then, the other animals and fairies from Ferngully come and rescue them, basically. And there's a few humans who help them as well. So that's really, it's a nice, cute story for kids, but it has some deep meaning there. Now this one, okay, people, you gotta watch this. This is like a movie based on the old 1980s version of My Little Pony. It's nothing like Friendship is Magic, but this is kind of a movie that stands on its own. My Little Pony, The Runaway Rainbow. And, okay, it's a cute movie, but the one thing I remember about this movie is that you have this one pony named Rainbow Dash, which of course is nothing like the Rainbow Dash of the future show Friendship is Magic. Some of the characters have the same names, but they're entirely different ponies who happen to share the same name. And for whatever reason, Rainbow Dash is voiced by a British voice actress. So she's like, rainbows, darling, rainbows, and she's just so funny. So you gotta love the voice acting in this, and the story is cute. That basically this princess pony has this magic wand, and she's irresponsible and does stupid things with it. It's funny. Now, okay, this has got to be the weirdest movie I've ever seen. I mean, okay. Basically, it's about a bunch of women who work in like this mall, this department store, like a clothing store, like in a mall, like think, I don't know, J.C. Penney or Dillard's or something like that. But it takes place in Australia, So it's a bunch of women who all work in a clothing store, and they all know each other, and they all end up friends, and a whole bunch of just completely mundane stuff happen. It's like if you were just watching people's lives and what their lives are like, with no scripted comedy, although occasionally things might be funny accidentally, but it's got very little humor in it. It's just weird. But I watched it, and why did I watch this movie? Because I was able to download it for free. It was like, oh, you've redeemed so many codes in moviesanywhere.com, so we're going to let you pick out a free movie to watch. So, that's how I watched this movie. It's funny how that worked. Now, Little Women. I have never actually, I've never read the book called Little Women, but this is, it's basically a movie apparently based on by that book, and I guess there's multiple movies made on that book. But I watched the trailer, it seemed interesting, and it's, basically a bunch of girls who live with their mother, and their father is away in war or something like that, and he eventually comes home. The only sad thing is that the girl who plays the piano ends up dying, of some sort of disease. I think it was scarlet fever. So I just spoiled that part of it. So if you don't like piano players dying, then don't watch that movie. Okay, now Maleficent. Okay, this is a weird one, but I had never actually seen the original Disney's cartoon of Sleeping Beauty, but this one is different because this story actually is centered around Maleficent, who's supposedly like the evil witch who cursed Sleeping Beauty to be asleep. But what ends up actually happening is that Maleficent herself actually undoes the curse instead of some prince. So they basically changed the plot of Sleeping Beauty, and it's just a weird movie. It's like if you want a real plot change on Sleeping Beauty, this is the movie for you. Now, Marvel Studios' Avengers Endgame, I actually had never seen any of the Marvel superhero movies ever until first I ended up watching Captain Marvel because it was, it was kind of advertised on iTunes, and I thought, a woman superhero, that's cool. So I watched that movie, but then I became curious about some of the other movies in the Avengers series after that. And there's a whole lot of Avengers movies. I don't think I'm gonna watch any more of them, but I was reading some on Wikipedia and was reading the plots of some of the movies, and I decided that this one was one I was also gonna watch. It's kind of like the ending of all the Avengers movies. So I saw Captain Marvel, and then I saw this one. And then the Alice in Wonderland movies. Oh man, Alice in Wonderland, these are like the real people type versions. And you gotta love the Mad Hatter. The Mad Hatter is a hilarious character. He's really the star of these movies. It's not so much even Alice, but it's the Mad Hatter that is just the really crazy one, and you never know what he's gonna say. Unless, of course, you watched the movie before. But the first one, Alice in Wonderland, and then, Alice Through the Looking Glass, it has a lot of time travel in it. So if you're into time travel, you'll like that type of thing. And of course, this is the cartoon, the original cartoon. I had never watched the original cartoon of Alice in Wonderland, and well, I decided to watch that, which was actually pretty good. And this movie, the cartoon movie, it's really nothing like the later movie that was made with the real people. Like the whole plot is different, whole different series of events happen. So it's not really of any connection. It shares the same name, shares similar characters, but it's very different. For one thing, Alice is more like a little girl in the cartoon, whereas she's more of like a teenager. She's probably like 18 years old or something in this and the other one, of the real people one. And as I already mentioned, Captain Marvel or Marvel. I watched this movie, and it's actually pretty good. Basically, this woman is like a normal woman, except she has super strength and fists that shoot rockets or fire or whatever. It's crazy. So it's kind of just a typical superhero movie. Now, Finding Dory. Yeah, I redeemed the code from the DVD that my mom bought somewhere a long time ago. So, actually, I think it's from the Disney Movie Club. She's in the Disney Movie Club. So, I like Finding Nemo and Finding Dory, but I happen to have Finding Dory in my collection. But we also have the DVD, so I don't really watch it on the computer much. It's more like I'll watch it with my mom. Now, the Snow Queen 2 is interesting. The first Snow Queen movie is actually available to watch for free on YouTube, but it has ads, but I did watch it. And then after that, I bought the Snow Queen 2, which is kind of an interesting sequel. You have to see the first one, obviously, to make sense of what's going on and understand who the characters are. But one very important fact to know is the Snow Queen is actually based. It's the original book that these series is based on is the same book that the Frozen series is based on. The only thing is in Frozen they radically changed the characters to where it's unrecognizable. they only loosely based Frozen off of that book, whereas the first of the Snow Queen movies is a little bit closer. But it's still not all that much like the book, because they really changed things in movies compared to the book. Although the movies are much more entertaining and have a lot more humor than the book could possibly have. Now, Joker, I can't remember what it was, why I watched this movie, but basically this guy is mistreated by society, and he basically just snaps and ends up killing people and shooting them with a gun and laughing about it. It's very weird, and he basically it's sort of implied that he kind of wants to go live in a mental hospital. So it's almost like he has to act, in order to get any help, he basically has to commit murder and act crazy and convince everyone he's crazy just so he has a place to live, because his life is falling apart. He loses his job. He finds out that his mother lied to him about so many things, and he ends up killing her too. It's like the saddest movie. If there is one movie you should not watch, it's Joker. But I know there will be people who will go and watch it just because I said not to watch it. So do it if you want, but it's very sad, and I sort of regret that I watched it. But I had heard about Joaquin Phoenix or something like that, however you say his name. And I feel like it's really a statement on mental illness and how society just doesn't understand people's problem. They can't get help they need, whether financial or emotional or mental. So they just go snap and they start becoming criminals. I think that's the moral of the story, if there's anything. So whatever, that's really all I can say about it. Now this one is, they should have called this one God's Not Dead 3. They should have just called it that, but instead they call it God's Not Dead, A Light in the Darkness. But it's basically God's Not Dead 3. That's basically what it is. You know, characters from the first two God's Not Dead movies are in it. It's including that one pastor of that church and his friend Jude. So basically the church burns down, and the pastor snaps, and he just goes crazy and starts fighting with people and has a real crisis of faith. So honestly, this movie, just like the first two God's Not Dead movies, really just makes Christians look bad. I gotta say, anyone who's watched the first God's Not Dead movie probably has an idea of just how badly some of these Christian movies are made. The message of the first God's Not Dead movie was basically, atheists are jerks and God wants them to get hit by a car. That's basically the message of the first movie. The second movie, with that whole dramatic court case, which was really wrong, everything in that movie was wrong, but I find that it was unfair how they treated that teacher who really hadn't done anything wrong. So that's my only issue with that, But there doesn't seem to be much of a moral message in the God's Not Dead series. But I was very curious about this one when I saw it advertised, so I watched it, and it was mildly interesting. But like I've said before, I can't make sense out of these Christian movies. Okay, now this one is great. Rise of the Guardians. So you have Jack Frost, Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, and the Sandman, which I had never previously heard about. You've got all these mythical characters all working together to fight some evil shadow nightmare guy. And it's just absolutely hilarious. But I find that Jack Frost is a very interesting character in this movie. So I became interested in it just because of other movies I had seen where people would take scenes of Jack Frost and scenes of Elsa and make it like they were boyfriend and girlfriend or something like that, which is cool. Come on, Queen Elsa and Jack Frost, they both have ice powers. They're like twins almost, and yet they're from totally different movies. Now, Man-Made Epidemic, this is one of those movies about, the connection between vaccines and autism and some of the harms about vaccines. So that's one of those documentaries about. Not to mention Vaxxed. I actually have the DVD, but it was convenient just to buy Vaxxed on YouTube and watch it because it had been a long time since I had watched it. So I watched that, and it's very sad, all the people who've been vaccine injured. And of course, this is a very short, this one here, Olaf's Frozen Adventure, is a bunch of little short stories containing the Frozen characters. Most is centered around Olaf and the things he does. I've got Frozen 2, and I like Frozen both 1 and 2. Frozen 2, has that song Into the Unknown, which goes through my head. I really like that song, as many people do. Okay, now I really do have to explain this. So, my friend Lucas, we would be having conversation at his house while we would play video games, and he would keep talking about that one time at band camp. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, it's an American Pie reference. So I had to know the truth about band camp. So I watched American Pie, and I also watched Band Camp, which is a whole movie about horrible things that happen at band camp. So now I know precisely what Lucas was referring to. I am not proud of this, but I had to know the truth about band camp. So it suddenly all makes sense now. So definitely R-rated movies, definitely something I should not have watched and will probably never watch again. But there was some funny stuff. You gotta love. You gotta understand. There is one girl who always talks about the one time at band camp this happened, another time at band camp something else happened, and it's always crazy. Now I have Cinderella 2 and 3. And Cinderella 2 and 3 are actually better than the first Cinderella movie. The first Cinderella story was just, everyone knows the old Cinderella story. There's not much to say about it. But the sequels that they made to that movie actually have entirely new plots that they just completely made up for the Disney movies. So it's very interesting. I highly recommend them. If you did like the first movie, or even if you hate the first movie, you might find a little bit more of a plot in the second and third movies. So it's good. Now, The Danish Girl is a very interesting one. So there's this Danish couple, and they're both artists. They're painters, but the husband basically wants to be a woman. He starts dressing up in women's clothes, and he wants to be a woman. And, society thinks he's like mentally ill, and they want to lock him up. And his wife tries to understand him, and she has a hard time with the fact that her husband wants to be a woman, and it's crazy. So, it was actually a very sad movie, a lot of what happened. But I definitely highly related to the husband, who was his name was Einar, but then I forgot the name they gave him. He had a female name that he went by in the movie, but it's been a long time since I've seen it, so I've forgotten it. Now, everybody talked about the 40-year-old virgin. It's like I kept hearing about this movie. People at work were talking about it, and me being I'm a 33-year-old virgin, so when people find out I'm a virgin, they make fun of me, and then they talk about the 40-year-old virgin, and so many people talked about this movie that I just had to see it. So I bought this movie and I watched it, and it was actually very interesting because although it's R-rated, there's a lot of horrible stuff in it. The core message that I really related is that this guy, he's not trying to have sex with anybody, okay? He's not really into that. But he has these 3 really perverted guys that he knows at work, and they're all trying to talk him into having sex with people, which has been my experience. Like, I've had so many people try to fix me, and they're like, "Oh, you just haven't met the right woman, dude. You need to have sex. It's beautiful." There's all these people the types of things people say to this main character in this movie are exactly like the kinds of things that they say to asexuals or people who are committed to celibacy. People don't understand it. They think that there's something wrong with you if you're not trying to have sex, and they try to fix you. So everybody is on a quest to cure my virginity, just like they were in this movie. And of course, the guy is not a virgin anymore by the end of the movie. So I found that kind of sad. But of course, they had to make it that way because, unfortunately, movies are all based on sex these days for some reason. I'm not sure why that is, with the exception of the G-rated kids movies. Now, this is like the three-dimensional Lion King. It's the newer Lion King movie, not the original cartoon. And it was pretty good, It's the story is pretty much the same, except the lions look real. They're digitally created, but all the animals look so real that some people are fooled into thinking they had real animals act all this movie. And here's the first Frozen movie. Oh wow, that's the end of the list. I can't believe I actually got through them all. Of course, I didn't review every single episode of Tangled, the animated series. But that's fine. I just basically gave an overview of each of these movies, what I thought the moral of the story is, the basic plot, how it is that I came to watch the movie, why I was interested in. So I basically just covered my whole YouTube purchases page, So I just covered all of these movies and then just gave an overview of the series, like the Hotel Transylvania season 1, and the Once Upon a Time, the Dragon Ball Z, and Rapunzel's Tangled Adventure. So I basically covered all this stuff. So I don't know if anybody actually went through all that, but that's what I have to say about that. So I hope somebody enjoyed it, and I did it in less than 45 minutes. I reviewed all those movies on that page. So that's cool. Well, goodbye for now. Maybe this will give you some ideas of movies you want to watch. You might find yourself interested in some of those movies. Some of them are just pretty funny, and I recommend. Others, you listen to me, and I do not recommend them. But I have spared you from those movies, so you know not to watch them.